Yeah, that's good. What's happening, people? Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today, we're going to have some fun. We are going to be talking about intermittent fasting, how to use it to get your best A1c, how to use it to lose weight, how to use it to maximize the number of years you're living on this planet, how to use it to maximize your cardiovascular health. I could go on and on how to maximize brain health, how to maximize muscle health, how to optimize mitochondrial health. The list goes on. Intermittent fasting, in case you haven't heard, is one of the most powerful, I might actually go to say it's probably the most powerful metabolic, one of the most effective metabolic tools that human beings have ever experienced that we know anything about. Plant-based nutrition is incredibly powerful, especially when it comes from low-fat, plant-based whole food nutrition. But intermittent fasting is more powerful, and I'm going to show you exactly why that's the case. So we're going to go into it in a lot of detail today. Now, we have a total of 1,266 people who have registered for this webinar. That's a lot of people. 1,266 people, and there's like 206 of you guys live already. So I'm going to load a poll right now, which you should see on your screen, which you can respond to, which says, what type of diabetes you're living with. So why don't you go ahead and, type in your response and give us an idea of what type of diabetes you're living with. And then also into the chat box, if you could answer a simple question. Where are you from? That's all I want to know. Where are you from? We love to see people from all over the world. And oftentimes we get a lot of respondents from Canada, sometimes from Australia. I don't even know what time of the day it is there, but we love to see that kind of commitment. So we got Chicago, Vermont, Napa, Susanna from Colombia. Look at that. Gwen from, I can't read that fast. Oh, man. Zonia from Houston, San Diego. Just so you guys know, I have my lovely, beautiful wife with me today.
Hi.
This is Kylie Buckner.
Hello.
And Kylie Buckner is, she's in our Facebook group. She's actually a registered nurse. She has a master's degree in nursing. She's brilliant. And of course, I'm biased because she's my wife. But she is the manager of our Facebook group. And I'm going to tell you all about the Facebook group a little bit later today. In fact, she's going to tell you about it. But as you guys are going through this webinar, if you have questions about any of the topics that we bring up, go into the chat box and just type your question in there. Kylie is going to be manning that. I have Tara in the background, and Tara is going to be taking questions and helping us create a Q&A. So at the end of the webinar, we'll do a lot of Q&A, and we'll be able to address a lot of the questions, a lot of the common questions that we see over and over and over again. So please don't be shy. You got a question, please put it in there, and we can go from there. Look at this poll. Right now, you got 263 of you live, which is awesome. And of the 263 attendees, we got 45% of you living with type 2, about 15% with type 1, and then about 20% with prediabetes. So a lot of the times we see there's a pretty large contingent of people who don't have diabetes or maybe who have a loved one with diabetes. But that doesn't seem to be today. So majority type 2 diabetes is kind of what I expect to see. So I'm going to stop that poll. And then I'm going to put up one more poll just because I like polls and polls are fun. And the question here is, what type of diet are you currently eating? Because I would like to know this. Okay. So on your screen, you can see what kind of diet, is it a ketogenic diet, which is a very low carbohydrate diet? Is it a low carbohydrate diet? Is it a paleo diet? Is it Mediterranean? Are you a vegetarian? Are you a vegan? Are you low fat, plant-based whole food? Or are you other? Wow. We haven't asked this question recently. Look at this. 70% of you guys are already low-fat, plant-based whole food, which means that I'm preaching to the choir at this point. So you guys can handle this by yourself. Webinar now. Okay, so we got a couple of people on low-carbohydrate diets. 5% of you on a Mediterranean. 8% of you, 10% of you on a vegetarian or vegan diet. Okay. All right. So it looks like the majority of you, about 60% of you, are on a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet. That's awesome to see. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to end that poll. And then, again, you got questions, put them in the chat box. And then we're going to go through Q&A at the end. But we're also going to answer questions as the webinar goes on. I want to show one thing to you guys. I got sunburned on my head last weekend. And now my head is peeling. I don't know if you guys can see this, but do you see this right here? It's like my skin is literally falling off of my head. So like this part of my head is a different color than this part of my head now. And so in case you didn't see that already, my head's in a little state of distress here. So anywho, enough about my head. Let's get on to the meat of the presentation. Okay, so here we go. We're going to dive right into the presentation. We're going to talk about intermittent fasting, and then we're going to have some fun. So I'm going to share my screen. And Tara, can you let me know if you can see? Does that look good? Should we proceed? If you can see the presentation full screen, then just type yes in the chat box. I know, Glenna says I need that. Okay. I'm waiting to see yeses. Can you guys see my screen? Yes, 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 yes. All right, cool, cool, cool.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, here we go. All right, so today's webinar is about intermittent fasting and how you can use it to achieve your best A1c. So let's get into it. Okay, here's what we're going to cover. Number one, why does intermittent fasting, why is it so powerful for increasing longevity? That's right. Intermittent fasting puts years onto your life, and I'll show you exactly how. How does intermittent fasting decrease fat stores? That's another really big advantage of doing frequent intermittent fasts. Number three, what are some different methods of intermittent fasting? How can you actually accomplish this in your daily life? Number four, how does intermittent fasting accelerate your rate of weight loss? And then number five, how and when to perform an intermittent fast. Okay, so here we go. In case you guys don't know me, I'm sure it sounds like a broken record at this point to a lot of you guys, but I'll run through this real quick. My senior year of college, 2002, I was 22 years old. I got diagnosed with three, not one, not two, but three autoimmune conditions in my senior year of college. So here I was, a senior at Stanford, just trying to graduate, studying engineering at the time, and I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's hypothyroidism, followed by alopecia universalis, which is why I have no hair and can sunburn my head easily. And then I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. All of that happened within a 6-month period, and the doctors at the time said, we've literally never seen anybody with these three autoimmune conditions. So you can imagine at the age of 22, if your doctors say, I have no idea, it's a little scary. So at that time, I didn't know anything about nutrition, and I said, hey, doctors, what can I do? Cyrus, you have one option and one option only, and that is to eat a low-carbohydrate diet, because carbohydrates are now your enemy. If you eat carbohydrate-rich food, you will need a lot of insulin, and that's not good. Eat more cheese and more butter and more eggs and more bacon and more meat and more fish, and eat only a small amount of things like breads, cereals, pastas, fruits, potatoes. So that's what I did. And again, at the age of 22, I was already kind of a carnivore. So telling me to eat more meat was actually a really good prescription. The problem was, even though this was supposed to make my life easier, it did the exact opposite. And it actually made my blood glucose a roller coaster. Every single day I could hit a 45, I could hit a 445. And it seemed like I just had no control over what my blood glucose meter was doing. Some days it felt like my blood glucose meter was just a random number generator. Like I could just shake it and it would throw up a number, and then I would have to deal with that number. The kicker for me was that exercise became super difficult, and I'm an athlete. And when you get in the way of my ability to move my body, we have some serious, serious problems. So after 1 year, I decided to transition to a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet because I had met a guru at the time who basically showed me the ropes. So I started eating foods like you see on the screen. Lots of color, lots of fruits, lots of vegetables. And I was expecting that my insulin use would go through the roof. So my carbohydrate intake went up big time. Started about 125 grams per day here. And then by the time week 3 was over, I was already up here, 600, sometimes even more than that. And I was expecting that my insulin use would do the same thing, but it didn't. Not only did it not do the same thing, it actually fell. So I was using somewhere about 40, 45 units of insulin per day. And then over the course of a 3-week period, I came all the way down into the low 20s. So it didn't make any sense because I was eating more carbohydrate for less insulin. And at that point, I knew something fascinating was happening. So this traditional idea that, more carbohydrate equals more insulin didn't seem to make any sense for me. And so at that point, I decided that I was going to go back to school and try and understand what was happening, because the medical world kept on saying the same thing over and over and over again, right? Eat more carbohydrate, need more insulin. Except the experiment that was underway in my body taught me differently. So I went to UC Berkeley. I studied there for 5 years. And while I was there, I read more than 3,000 scientific papers on diabetes, on insulin resistance, on intermittent fasting. And I actually wrote a thesis on the causes of insulin resistance and how you can use intermittent fasting as one tool to try and reverse insulin resistance and diabetes. So here I am today, 15 years from when I was first diagnosed in 2002. I reduced my insulin use by about 40% overall. On a daily basis, I eat more than 700 grams of carbohydrate per day, and that is not a typo. That is a true statement. The reason why that's a big number is because most people living with diabetes will eat 700 grams of carbohydrate maybe in a week. Some people will eat 700 grams of carbohydrate in a month. But I'm eating that on a daily basis, and I'm doing it using approximately 25 units of insulin. And that being said, my A1c values are actually between 5.6 and 6.0% on every single time I get it checked. So that's where we are today. Okay, so today's webinar is not about me. It's not about my story. It's about intermittent fasting and how and why, most importantly, not to eat food. So more importantly, this webinar is about how you can use intermittent fasting as a tool to decrease your risk for chronic disease, and not only decrease your risk, but actually decrease the severity of existing chronic disease in your body. So first things first, what is intermittent fasting? So intermittent fasting is simply an umbrella term that refers to any time you manipulate the timing of your food intake. So, think of intermittent fasting as kind of a catch-all term, right? You can perform an intermittent fast in, any number of, there's literally hundreds of different ways you can do it. But at the root of it all, what you're attempting to do is manipulate the amount of time that you spend either eating or not eating. And if you do it correctly, you can induce an intermittent fast that can then give you a whole host of metabolic benefits. So let's take a trip back in time, back to the 1930s. That's when calorie restriction and intermittent fasting was first born, or at least was first discovered for humans. Now, the way that it was discovered was in a research laboratory. So researchers took mice and they started to play around with them and try and find out what happens to mice if you feed them less food. So group number one, and they designed a whole series of experiments that looked something like this. You take a whole collection of mice and you split them into 2 different groups. In group number 1, you feed them what's called an ad lib diet or an ad libitum diet, which is Latin for this is confusing. And think of it as like a all-you-can-eat Sizzler buffet, right? So these animals are basically provided with as much food as they want, and they just eat according to their appetite. Animals in group number 2 were fed less than animals in group number 1. So what they actually do is they determine the average amount of food that animals in group 1 eat, and then they subtract either 10% or 15% or 20% or 40% or 60% of that food and feed that amount of food to group number 2. Okay, so here's what happened, guys. What you're looking at is called a survival curve. So let me walk you through this, okay? On the x-axis, you have age in months. So this is the age of mice measured in months. And then over here on the y-axis, you have percent surviving. So at the beginning of the experiment, there's 100% of animals are alive. And then over the course of time, as you move this direction, you start to see some animals dying. And as a result of that, you end up with a curve that starts to angle sort of down and to the right. So researchers had no idea what to expect because they were like, well, wait a minute, these animals are not eating as much, therefore they're probably going to die quicker, right? You know, if you don't eat as much food, you know, your survival is probably reduced, your immunity is reduced, and therefore natural selection will probably kill you quicker. But it turns out that the animals that were fully fed were the ones that started to die first. So these animals, shown in this thick black line here, were dying at the most rapid rate. And then following them were the animals that were restricted by 10%. So the animals that were restricted by 10% actually lived an average of about 6 to 7 months longer. And then the animals that were 50% calorie restricted ended up living an extra 15 months longer. And then the animals that were 60% calorie restricted lived the longest. So if you go all the way down here to the bottom to try and find out at what age did every single animal die, the ad-lib fed animals died at about 35 months. And then the animals that were 50 and 60% calorie restricted died at approximately 50 to 55 months. So we're looking at an extension of life that's 20 months. But for a mouse, 20 months is a big deal. So this is about a 40% increase in longevity. Imagine that 40% longer life from eating 50 to 60% less food. So this is the first time researchers saw this, and they were flabbergasted at the results. So they repeated these experiments over and over and over and over and over again in the 30s, in the 40s, in the 50s, in the 70s, in the 80s, back in the 90s, all the way to now. And every single time you conduct a calorie restriction experiment, you get the same result. Okay, you get the same result. The survival curve gets pushed further and further and further to the right, and you know, there comes a limit. It's not like you can't feed an animal zero food and then have them live infinitely long, but researchers have found that somewhere around the 60 to 65% marker is where you can actually maximize longevity. Okay, so the next question they asked is, well, how's this possible? Like, what's actually happening under the surface? And you know, over the past 85 years, scientists have discovered a whole collection of really important metabolic improvements. Number one, reduced tumor incidence, and that's just code for saying animals that eat less food have less cancer. Okay, they don't grow tumors as quickly, they don't proliferate tumors as quickly, they have less tumor incidence and therefore less cancer incidence. Number two, animals that eat less food have less diabetes. They suffer from insulin resistance less, they have less blood glucose issues, they have less pancreatic issues, they have improved muscle and liver health. Number three, animals that eat less food are skinnier, they have less body fat. Surprise, surprise. Number four, animals that eat less food have improved neurological function. What that means is that their brain works better. Very surprising result. Number five, animals that eat less food are more active than animals that eat a lot. Well, how can that be? Well, animals that eat less food, the reason they can be more active is because they're foraging. They're looking for food at all times. And as a result of that, they have to be active. The same thing happens in human beings. The more food you eat, the more weight you gain, the more sedentary you become. Then finally, they found that mice and rats and other rodents also benefit from improved mitochondrial function. And we'll go into that in a little bit of detail here. Okay, so here's the best part. Since the 1930s, more than 3,500 papers have been written about the actual cellular mechanisms underlying calorie restriction. And the beauty is that the information is conserved amongst all species. So what that means is, regardless of whether you study yeast or worms or flies or mice or rats or monkeys or goats or sheep or pigs or dogs or human beings, the exact same cellular mechanisms are at play. And that's what makes calorie restriction such a fascinating topic, because it's not limited to just mammals, right? It translates over to the insect world. It translates over to the, what are worms, reptilian world? I don't even know. It translates over to the yeast world, right? This is fascinating. There's no other biological mechanism that's this pervasive amongst species from completely different phyla. Okay, now, factoid number 2. Calorie restriction is the only known way to actually add years to your life. You cannot do it via any other mechanism. You cannot exercise more to add years to your life. If you turn to me and you said, Cyrus, I want to live longer on this planet, how do I do that? And I were to say, hey, you just exercise more, go for a run, go to the gym, I would be lying to you, because exercise does not add years to your life. It simply increases the quality of your existing years. Number 2, you can meditate all you want. You can be at peace all you want. You can relax and reduce your stress levels all you want. You will not live a single day longer on this planet. Okay? Calorie restriction is the only known way to actually add years to your life. Eat less food, live longer. Have less disease and live longer. And that, to me, is actually quite fascinating. So here's a question. How does it actually add years to your life, right? So we talked about the fact that it improves a number of different organ systems. It improves your cardiovascular health, it decreases your cancer risk, and it improves your glucose metabolism at the same time, okay? So yeah, it would be nice if there was something that you could do that could improve your cardiovascular health, and then maybe some other thing that you could do that would decrease your cancer risk, and then maybe some other thing that would improve your glucose health. But it turns out that calorie restriction does all of it at one time, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Okay, so when you eat a lot of food, if you're eating a diet that's either high in calories or high in fat or high in sugar, you end up with atherosclerosis. And atherosclerosis is basically the accumulation of lipid or fat inside of blood vessels all throughout your body. And given that you have an absurd number of literally thousands of miles of blood vessels all throughout your body, it makes sense to try and keep that tissue extremely healthy so that tissues all around your body can get the nutrients they need. The problem is that when you eat a high-calorie diet, or when you consume too much sugar, or when you consume too much fat, you end up with these lipid deposits right here, this sort of white, scaly material that starts to form on the inside. It gets oxidized or hardened, and then you get calcium deposits on top of that, and then it turns into a plaque. And as soon as that happens, this cross-sectional diameter goes down, the pressure starts to build up, and then you have a serious problem inside of blood vessels that can then result in an increased risk for stroke, an increased risk for a heart attack, and an increased risk for death. So obviously, none of those are appealing scenarios, and it turns out that intermittent fasting is one of the most effective ways that you can reverse the atherosclerotic process. And the reason for that is because intermittent fasting is a very effective way to clear these oxidized lipid deposits from inside of your blood vessels. So rather than having these accumulated LDL particles that then harden and form these arterial plaques, when you perform intermittent fasts, you end up chipping away at this stuff little by little by little by little by little. So you do one intermittent fast and maybe you get 2% less atherosclerotic plaques all throughout your body. And then you do another intermittent fast and maybe there's another 1% reduction. And you repeat that process over and over and over and over again. And before you know it, 3 months, 5 months, 12 months down the line, you have a completely new and, most importantly, elastic vasculature. And that's very important because when blood vessels have the ability to expand and contract, that's when your cardiovascular health is maximized. And that's when tissues are able to receive the nutrients that they are looking for directly from cells within your blood. Okay, so now when it comes to cancer, this is something that is actually absolutely fascinating to me. I did my PhD in the laboratory of a gentleman named Dr. Mark Hellerstein at UC Berkeley. Dr. Hellerstein is considered a world's expert on measuring the rate at which cells can multiply. he has invented a technique using isotope labels that enables you to actually measure how quickly tissues are turning over in your body. And it's fascinating. It's one of the most complex math equations I've ever seen in my life. And we had a very unique opportunity to be able to use some very sophisticated machinery while we were in graduate school. Now, one of the things in this process is that intermittent fasting decreases what's called your global cell proliferation rate. So translated into English, that means that intermittent fasting slows down the rate at which cells make copies of themselves. And that's a good thing for you, because the less frequently mature cells are replicating themselves and turning into daughter cells, the less chance there is to propagate genetic errors. And when you slow down the rate at which genetic errors are being propagated from generation to generation to generation, you end up reducing the risk for the development of oncogenes inside of cells that then can progress into tumor cells, that then can progress into metastatic tumors that can then actually take your life. Okay, so cancerous cells, okay, the reason that they're cancerous in the first place is because they have accumulated a number of DNA modifications or DNA replication errors that has enabled the cell to now act independently of its outside environment. So this cell might be receiving signals from neighboring cells or from the blood that says, hey, do this. Hey, don't replicate. Hey, don't take up those protein, those amino acids in the blood. Hey, don't manufacture these inflammatory molecules. And the cancer cell says, cool, thanks, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, okay? So it's this rogue cell that basically is acting autonomously, not paying attention to any of the signals that it's getting from the outside world. So when, cancer cells are prevalent in every tissue inside of your body at all times, and your body does one heck of a job at clearing these cancer cells out of tissues and trying to do what's called apoptosis or programmed cell death. So a number of these cells, actually, majority of these cells end up committing suicide. However, the ones that don't commit suicide can do this thing called proliferation, which is they make copies of themselves. So in the process of proliferating, a cell that has accumulated enough genetic errors to actually act on its own then makes a copy and another copy and another copy and another copy and another copy. And before you know it, you have what's called a tumor. So if you can slow down this cell proliferation rate and prevent this cell from making so many Xerox copies of itself, then you're slowing down the rate at which these tumors form. And that's a good thing, because then you can decrease your cancer risk. And that's exactly what intermittent fasting does. It basically is a signal to tell these cancerous cells, slow down. Okay, the copy machine is not working very well. Don't make a copy of yourself. Relax. And as a result of that, this tumor formation process doesn't happen nearly as easily. Okay, so I say this over and over and over again. Practically every single webinar, I'm going to say it one more time. Insulin resistance is caused by the storage of fat in tissues that are not designed to store fat. So, we tell all of our clients in our coaching program that when we have the opportunity to meet in person, I am going to look for a tattoo that says insulin resistance is caused by the storage of fat in tissues that are not designed to store fat. Okay, I have this tattooed on the inside of my back, on my lower back. I'm lying, I don't have this tattooed, but this is very important to understand. Okay. The reason why it's important to understand is because the medical field does not believe that insulin resistance is a very big deal in any condition outside of type 2 diabetes. So the medical world knows that insulin resistance is the precursor for prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. This is very well established. However, it turns out that insulin resistance also underlies autoimmune diabetes, type 1 and type 1.5 diabetes, and it underlies gestational diabetes and polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, this is very important to understand, because insulin resistance is this unifying metabolic condition which underlies all three of these different flavors of glucose metabolism disorders. And once you understand that, then rather than dealing with the symptoms of type 1 or 1.5 diabetes, or the symptoms of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, or the symptoms of gestational diabetes and polycystic ovarian syndrome, treat the root cause. Treat the root cause of the problem, get to the root of insulin resistance, find out what's causing it, reverse it, and then your ability to live with an autoimmune version of diabetes is simplified. You can get rid of prediabetes and type 2 diabetes altogether, and you can significantly improve your health living with gestational diabetes and polycystic ovarian syndrome. So intermittent fasting, on top of decreasing your risk for cancer, on top of improving your cardiovascular health, also increases your insulin sensitivity. Let's figure out how this works, okay? In your blood, you got insulin, you got glucose. Now, the two of these are circulating at all times, and the reason is because glucose is a fuel, and glucose's job is to get to your brain primarily, and then to get into your muscle and to get into your liver. And insulin is merely the escort that says, hey, knock, knock, do you want some glucose? Now, when you accumulate fat inside of your muscle and inside of your liver as a result of a high fat diet, especially a high saturated fat diet, you end up developing insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is basically the over accumulation of fatty acids in tissues that are not designed to store fatty acids. So if you're eating a diet that is either a ketogenic diet or a low carbohydrate diet or a diet that just simply has too much fat in it, regardless of whether that fat comes from plants or whether it comes from animals, these fatty acids shown here in yellow end up accumulating inside of your liver, and they end up accumulating inside of your muscle. So as soon as your muscle and liver end up accumulating these fatty acids because they don't have a choice, then you end up developing insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is not about, it's not about your pancreas. I mean, it can be about your pancreas, but in general, insulin resistance affects your liver, your muscle, and your blood vessels. And when insulin resistance is first created as a result of too much fat, then all three of these tissues are assaulted every single time you open your mouth, and that causes a significant problem. So when you switch over and you start eating a lower fat diet, okay, I'm not talking about a zero fat diet. I'm not talking about a no fat diet. That doesn't exist. I'm literally just talking about reducing your fat intake and trying to eat as many plants as possible. Then you see a change in the distribution of fuel inside of the tissues, inside of your liver and muscle. So rather than your liver and muscle being accumulated with a lot of yellow and a small amount of blue, now your liver and muscle end up with a lot of blue and a small amount of yellow. And that's a good thing for you, because as soon as this happens, insulin can now act one more time and allow glucose to get out of your blood and into tissues where it belongs. So your liver health is improved, your muscle health is improved, and your vasculature can return to being elastic, and that atherosclerotic process that we talked about earlier can get reversed simply by dropping the fat intake of your diet and increasing your plant food intake. Now, intermittent fasting does the exact same thing, okay? Intermittent fasting also maximizes your liver health, your muscle health, and it maximizes the health of your vasculature, as we saw earlier. So, you know, low-fat, plant-based, whole food nutrition works. It works like a charm. Intermittent fasting is another, it's almost a faster way of getting it done. It's a more effective way of getting it done. And the beauty is that you can do both intermittent fasting and low-fat, plant-based, whole food nutrition at the same time. Now, another thing that intermittent fasting does is it maximizes the health of mitochondria. So in case you guys don't remember, maybe you fell asleep in biology class in high school, or maybe you didn't even take biology in college, shame on you. If that's the case, then let's do a little quick biology lesson here. Mitochondria are the, what do you want to call them? The powerhouses, the ovens, the energy generation factories, the power plants of cells all throughout your body. So almost every single cell type in your body has a mitochondria, multiple copies of mitochondria, because it's required in order to generate ATP, and ATP is necessary to metabolize nutrients and stay alive. So your muscles are the most mitochondrial dense tissue in your body. Red muscle, literally, you cut an animal open or you cut a human being open and you will find muscle that is stained red. The redder the muscle, the more mitochondria there is inside. So red muscle has high mitochondrial content. A mixed muscle has a medium mitochondrial content. A white muscle has a low mitochondrial content. And it's all relative because, of course, your white muscle can still have more mitochondria than a different tissue type. But as far as muscle is concerned, red equals more, white equals less. Now, your diet is what determines your mitochondrial health. So again, high fat, high calorie, high sugar diet. As you consume a diet that's high in any of these nutrients, you end up generating free radicals. Free radicals are really, really, really dangerous molecules. These are inflammatory molecules. They're electrically unstable. They're missing an electron. And in order to get that electron back, they will do anything they possibly can. They will bombard themselves into DNA because DNA is chock full of electrons. So they will gain access to the mitochondria to go into mitochondrial DNA and cause breaks. They will go into the nucleus and they will cause strand breaks in order to gain access to more electrons. So they cause direct DNA damage, and that's a huge problem because as soon as DNA is damaged, remember what we talked about earlier, you damage DNA, you create the possibility of creating a precancerous cell that can then progress to becoming a cancerous cell. Free radicals also cause protein oxidation, meaning that they modify and oxidize protein inside of any cellular structure, whether that's in the membrane, whether that's in the mitochondria, whether that's in the endoplasmic reticulum, it doesn't matter. Okay, wherever protein exists, free radicals will go. And then free radicals also cause lipid peroxidation or lipid damage. And the membrane of all cells is made up of what's called a lipid bilayer. And so as soon as you damage the lipid bilayer and other lipids within a cell, then you have a serious problem. And like I talked about earlier, if a cell sustains too much free radical damage, it will do its best to commit suicide if those repairs are irreparable. So free radicals, they cause extensive damage in tissues all throughout your body. So it can happen in your joints, in your knee, in your hip, in your shoulder, in your elbow, in your wrist. But it can also happen in your heart, in your brain, in your thyroid, in your kidney, in your pancreas, inside of your testicles, inside of your breast tissue. It can happen everywhere. So we're talking about a low grade of chronic inflammation that can be generated from the production, the excess production of free radicals. So how do you prevent free radical damage? Well, you got mainly two options. Number one, you either minimize the amount of free radicals that are created in the first place, or number two, you quench free radicals when they are formed. So you either limit the supply by cutting off the rate at which they're created, or you limit the damage by quenching them as soon as they do appear. So it turns out that intermittent fasting is one of the most effective techniques for cutting off the supply. This is how it does it, okay? Intermittent fasting does number one. It doesn't do number two. So here's how it works. You eat, if you start intermittent fasting, a lot of free radical production goes down into a very small amount of free radical production. Number two, less free radicals means less DNA damage. It means less protein oxidation. It means less lipid peroxidation. It means improved cellular health. Now, antioxidants, if you were to eat antioxidant-rich foods like, acai berries or amla berries or pomegranate or goji berries or blackberries, any of these foods that are very high in antioxidant content, tomatoes for heaven's sakes, they have a whole collection of antioxidants, which are shown here in green. So the antioxidants go and they can actually quench and they can donate electrons to these free radical molecules and they can limit the damage that way. But when you're not eating food and you're intermittent fasting, then you're not getting a large supply of antioxidants and instead you're basically just making less free radicals. Now, when it comes to understanding how and when to perform an intermittent fast, okay, remember, intermittent fasting is simply an umbrella term that refers to how you manipulate the timing. So there's many ways you can slice this beast. Okay, I'm going to show you 3 different methods which tend to be very, very effective and most importantly, sustainable, okay? It's very important that we talk about sustainability when we talk about intermittent fasting, because if you simply just reduce the amount of food you're eating, like we talked about at the beginning with those mice, okay? It's a very difficult thing to do, okay? So you may be adding years to your life, but it's not very pleasant. It's not very fun, okay? If I told you, hey, you're gonna eat 50% less food every single day for the rest of your life, you probably would not be very happy about that, okay? I know for a fact that I wouldn't be happy about that because I like to eat food. So what we have to do instead is not try and think of, how can we replicate the mouse experiment? What we want to know is how can we create a situation, how can we create a formula that actually works for human beings, not just for the course of a 2-month experiment, but for the rest of your life. So if you're curious about how to do that, then there's 3 different techniques which will work. The first one is the once per week, 24-hour intermittent fast. And the way that this works is simply by choosing one day of the week when you're relatively sedentary. Okay, so if I know that I'm not going to work out on a Wednesday, then I say, okay, great, I'm just going to choose that as my 24-hour fasting period, and I'm going to stop eating food after dinner on Tuesday, and then I'm going to resume eating food after dinner on Wednesday. So my 24-hour fast basically goes from the end of Tuesday to the end of Wednesday. And this right here is a simple way where you can cut out about, 1,500 to 2,000 calories over the course of a full week, which will give you something like a 15% reduction in your calorie intake over the course of 7 days. So this is ideal for people who want to lose between 20 and 50 pounds. Okay, this is a very effective technique that's going to significantly accelerate your rate of weight loss, in addition to the weight loss that you may experience from eating a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet. It's also a very effective way to reduce your need for oral medication on the days that you do fast. And then it's also an effective way of reducing your need for insulin on the days that you do fast, if you are injecting insulin, as I do every day. So that's technique number 1. Now, technique number 2 is this. You basically are going to choose 2 different 24-hour periods throughout the week to perform a fast. So here I chose Monday and Thursday. Now, why Monday and Thursday? Well, because I'm trying to space them out. Okay, what you probably don't want to do is do 2 24-hour fasts in a row, or do them separated by 1 day. You could probably get away with it, but I'm telling you, you're going to hate yourself. It's going to be really hard. So instead of doing that, space them out. Maybe do one at the beginning of the week and one towards the end of the week. And by doing it that way, you can use these intermediary days like Tuesday and Wednesday to actually refuel and start to feel a little bit more energy. And then repeat that fast again after a couple of days of refueling. So if you do it this way, now you're going to get about a 30% reduction in your total calorie intake. And this right here is going to give you some excellent results as well. So the twice per week 24-hour fast, I will not lie to you, it's definitely more challenging than the single 24-hour fast. This is ideal for people who want to lose more than 50 pounds. And it significantly accelerates your rate of weight loss, even more so than a single 24-hour fast. And just like the previous fast, it reduces your need for both oral medication as well as insulin on the days that you fast. And it can also carry over into the days after you fast so that you can improve your metabolic health and be less dependent on oral medication. Now, this one is my favorite, okay? The daily 16-8 intermittent fast. So a 16-8 is basically a fancy, super nerd scientific way of saying, don't eat food for 16 hours and only eat food for 8 hours. So it's actually pretty simple to do. And you basically are just going to choose one 8-hour long window and eat food during that window. So the way to do that is to either eliminate your breakfast or eliminate your dinner. It's one of the two. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I eliminated my breakfast. If I did that, then I would start eating food at approximately noon, And then I would eat food within an 8-hour window from noon until 8 p.m. So that's my go time. That's when I can eat a lunch, I can eat a snack, I can eat a dinner. In fact, I can eat as much as I want during that 8 hours, because the following 16 hours, I'm not going to be eating any food. Now you might think to yourself, well, that's silly, Cyrus, because I'm just going to stuff my face during that 8-hour window, and then I'm going to fast during the 16-hour window, and then, I'm not going to be calorie restricted. Well, it turns out that that's very hard to do. And part of the reason why a 16-8 intermittent fast works so brilliantly is because it's in that 8-hour window. It's actually very challenging to eat as much food as you normally would have eaten in a smaller window. You can definitely train yourself to stuff large amounts of food in your body in an 8-hour window, but that's not the point. The point is to get by during that 8 hours and feel full and just be okay with life. But then capitalize on the fact that 16 hours out of every single day, which is 2/3 of the day, you are not eating food and you're getting all the metabolic benefits that we spoke about earlier. And another beautiful thing about a 16-8 intermittent fast is that your brain is very good at learning patterns. So if you decided that you didn't want to eat breakfast every single day for the next week, your brain would eventually learn in a very short period of time. It would learn, oh, wait a minute, there's no food available in the morning hours. I'm not going to send out a hunger signal anymore, because the hunger signal never works. So if you perform a 16-8 intermittent fast, you may find that during the times when you're not eating food, you're just not hungry. And that's a beautiful thing, because then you don't have to sit there and be preoccupied with when's the next meal, when's the next meal. Okay, so this is a more ideal scenario for people who would prefer to skip one meal per day, or for people who just don't like fasting for 24 hours. Maybe it's really difficult for you. Maybe you go hypoglycemic. Maybe it's, maybe you get hangry. Maybe, you don't like to be around people, or people don't like to be around you. And if that's the case, then try a 16-8 fast. Try it for a week and see what happens. This is a very effective way for accelerating your rate of weight loss and getting all the metabolic benefits that we talked about earlier as well. So a question that we get from people all the time is to say, hey, can I exercise during a fasting day? My answer to you is, please don't. Please don't. And the reason is because on days when you fast, expect that you're probably going to have less energy than you would on days when you are eating food. I know I notice that every single time. I get yawny, I get sleepy, I might take a nap in the middle of the day, but that's okay. So if you try and exercise on those days, one of the things that can happen, especially if you're living with diabetes or some type of glucose metabolism disorder, you can end up going hypoglycemic, meaning your blood glucose can go quite low. It can cross beneath that threshold of 70 milligrams per deciliter, or 3.8 millimolars. And as soon as it goes down there, then you're in a situation where now, it's not safe. It's definitely not a safe place to be. Okay. I don't want anybody to be going to the emergency room simply because they tried to exercise on an intermittent fasting day. Do yourself a favor, relax. Only when you become a pro at fasting, and I'm talking about you have done 25 intermittent fasts and you know the ins and outs of it and how your body responds, then and only then do I recommend trying exercising on an intermittent fasting day. I wrote here 8 intermittent fasts, but I'm just going to increase that to 25 because it can be a very dangerous process. And then another question that people always ask is, should I reduce my use of oral medication on fasting days? When it comes to insulin use, absolutely. You'll find that if you're injecting insulin, you just don't need as much insulin because you're just not eating as much food. It's very straightforward. When it comes to oral medication, I have to put this caveat here every single time. I'm not a doctor. I cannot tell you by law, what to do with your oral medication. I do recommend speaking with your doctor about it. We have heard from many people in our coaching program that on days when they perform an intermittent fast, they don't need as much oral insulin sensitizing medication. They don't necessarily need their blood pressure medication, or they can get by with less diabetes or less blood pressure medication. So I'll just tell you the experience of people. And again, if you're interested in knowing more about that, please consult with your doctor and speak directly with them. Okay. So the question that we have for you is, given all this information, we would love to know if you're interested in learning about our coaching program that involves both low-fat, plant-based, whole food nutrition, as well as intermittent fasting to maximize your diabetes health. So if you're interested in learning about our coaching program, we'll tell you all about it, but we want to make sure that you want to learn about it. So if you do want to learn about it, type the word yes in the chat box. And if we see a lot of yeses, then we can proceed and go from there. So I see in the chat box, Gwen, Wendy, Carolyn, Verla, Paul, John, Marilyn, SM.
Awesome.
Lots of people are saying yes. So I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful, beautiful wife, Kylie Buckner. Again, she's a nurse. She's the manager of our Facebook group, and she's very, very well experienced. She's got a lot of experience in our coaching program.
Yeah, and we talk about fasting a lot in our coaching program. So it's something that we really promote, and we talk a lot about. We actually have a lot of fun with fasting. We host group intermittent fasts in our program, so that way there's a lot of support built in for people who are trying their first fast, and we actually do answer a lot of questions around fasting on your fasting days and how to schedule them. So we'll talk a little bit more about the program and specifics of it. So the Mastering Diabetes online group coaching program, it is the first online coaching program that is designed to teach you how to maximize your insulin sensitivity using the tools that we were explaining to you today, including the approach of a low-fat, plant-based, whole food diet. And in this program, the very first tool that we teach is about this strategy of the low-fat, plant-based, whole food nutrition, and why adopting a low-fat approach using plant-based foods is so powerful in reversing insulin resistance and in getting control of your diabetes health. And as you can see here, these are examples of the foods that we are helping you to add into your life. So we are helping people every day to add more fruit, add more vegetables, add more whole grains into their diet. And we have a lot of fun doing it.
Absolutely. 100%.
So the very first thing that we teach you about is what types of foods can you actually eat? What do you eat on this program? So the first thing we do is we talk about the idea of green light, yellow light, and red light foods. And these are the foods that we recommend eating. The green light foods are the foods we recommend eating in abundance. So there's really no limitations to adding in fruits of all sorts, non-starchy vegetables, starchy vegetables, beans, lentils, and peas, green leafy vegetables, intact whole grains, and lots of herbs and spices to make this, to add flavor into your meals. So these are foods that we are combining in different ways, that we're making beautiful meals out of, and we're sharing our ideas with each other. And then the yellow light category, you see foods like that are higher in fat. They are plant-based foods that tend to be higher in fat. And these are things like nuts and seeds, avocados, coconuts, olives, pastas, pasta alternatives like your brown rice pastas and things like that, and then sprouted breads. And in this category, we recommend keeping this in moderation, because the more and more of these types of foods that you add into your diet, that's where you start to see some trouble with blood glucose management. So, so green light foods, abundance; yellow light food, moderation; and then you've got your red light foods. And in our approach, these include all dairy products, eggs, processed meats, red meat, white meat, poultry, shellfish, oils of any kind, refined sugars, and then pastries and breads. So processed foods. So this is an example of the list that we include for you so that you can see exactly what you need to be eating. And in this, in the online group coaching program, people are showing us the pictures of their food every day. And these are some of the really healthy, nutritious, vibrant, beautiful meals that people are producing and making and sharing every single day while in our program. So it just looks delicious. And we really try to help people combine your you're really getting an abundance of and variety of fruit and vegetables in your diet. Here's some more pictures of, these are pictures actually that came out of the Carbohydrate Ninja, I think. So this is our own recipe guide. We, of course, with lots of recipes, including all of these amazing fruits that you see here. So these are really, really beautiful pictures. I hope you guys are really loving these photos because
I'm getting hungry.
They're gorgeous. And so we're just going to take a little peek inside the program and see what it looks like. So in the coaching program, we have 3 very powerful tools that we work with you using these tools. The first tool is our step-by-step online course, and this is your one-stop shop for information. The second tool is our private Facebook community where you receive daily support and guidance throughout your journey in our program. And then our final tool is the live Q&A video conferences that we host twice per month, where we answer questions in person and in a live format. So tool number 1, which is the online course. It's a custom-built course. Cyrus and Robbie have put a lot of thought and effort into building this course. And when you are in our program, you get full access to the entire course. And the course is divided up by lessons. So each of the lessons breaks down our course into a step-by-step system. And it's proven to work. We've worked with many, many people using this exact approach. And basically in each of the lessons, they're designed for a week-by-week strategy. And within that, you're changing one meal at a time. So we're not asking anybody to turn over their diets overnight. You know, we work on a strategy to help you make meal-by-meal changes on a week-by-week basis. So first we lay the foundation and work on breakfast, just changing one meal. The second lesson is about use of the decision tree, which is a phenomenal tool to help you track your food that you're eating, track the carbohydrate and fat intake that you're eating every day, helps you understand what your day looks like. And this is where we get into lunch and changing your lunch. And then lesson 3 is all about rating your pantry and your cabinets and your cupboards and getting rid of food that may not serve you anymore, looking at nutrition labels, understanding the content of the food that's inside your pantry, and how to maybe eliminate some of that from your life. Lesson 4, which is all about what we talked about tonight, is intermittent fasting and understanding your basal insulin needs. We have a whole lesson dedicated to intermittent fasting. It's such a powerful tool. And we not only refer back to this lesson frequently in the program, but we encourage people to really continue referring to this lesson to understand the process of fasting. Lesson 5 is about fitness and all about exercise. Lesson 6 is about logistics of food buying and preparation and how to bulk prep food. We talk about the Instant Pot and all sorts of tools that you can use to help make your life easier during this transition, how to shop it in bulk places or wholesale shops, where to buy your food so that you can still get a variety of food. So that's all included in lesson 6. And then lesson 7 is a wonderful lesson and all about situations, how to take your own kitchen and out into the world, into your family situations, parties, holidays, into restaurants, even navigating situations like that. So the course is really the place to go for the actual information. And there's many videos and PDFs and things that you can print out or just watch or listen to. A lot of people listen to the videos while they're driving, just as if it were like a podcast. So it's a really great program and great course. The second tool is my favorite place, which we have a lot of fun in our private Facebook community. And we actually just hit our 800th member in the group. And there's over 900 people in the group.
There's over 950 people in the group now.
In the group.
Yeah.
So we are almost at 1,000 people in our private Facebook community, which is amazing. So in this private Facebook group, it is a monitored group. We have a team of coaches who monitor to make sure that everybody who's a member of our coaching program is in this Facebook community. And our coaching team here is in this group every single day. So we commit to responding to every single original post within 24 hours. And we get questions ranging from all walks of this transition into plant-based nutrition. We love seeing Facebook posts. We share pictures of food and recipes. People are sharing their blood glucose improvements, or even when they're struggling and seeing, like, I need help with my blood glucose measurement, something's off, I'm not doing something. We really encourage people to post away. Share your decision trees, see what you're eating and see how we can help make suggestions. We talk about medication reduction. We talk about doctor's appointment visits, how to communicate with your physician and your healthcare providers. It's such an important part of this process, is partnering with our physicians and our healthcare providers so that they understand that we have a plan as we're making the changes in our lifestyle. And so we do talk about this. We talk about how to prep for appointments, and then what to do with the information that you received when you were at your appointment. We talk about travel and social situations and how to make plans around going to parties and, what am I going to do at so-and-so's birthday party? Somebody's having an event that I have to go to, and what am I going to eat? So we talk about these things, and we also share struggles. People feel really safe to share their concerns and their fears and their disappointments even. I think that it's a really great community for people to get support and also share when they need to. And we've just recently added 2 new coaches to our group, and we're just having a lot of fun there. Like I said, we host events. We post events there, and so we post all of our webinars so that people are informed of when we're hosting webinars. We post our Q&A calls. We all host intermittent fasts, so that if you're ready for a fast, then you can just join in the fun and we'll do a fast together. We actually have a fast scheduled for next Wednesday, which is Valentine's Day, and it's a heart health fast. It's themed around loving yourself and taking really good care, the best care of your heart, as using this one particular tool of intermittent fasting to do that. And these are just some comments that people have made in our Facebook group, some actual posts that people have shared. And this person shared that basically they dropped their A1c to 6.4, and prior to that it had been 11 or 12, and so the plan was to get it below 6. So off to a great start for quickly making changes in their life. This one is basically about injecting Humalog and how changes happen when you start maybe adjusting your injection sites, and surprised at how well that worked. So we have these comments coming in from people left and right about incredible results, losing weight, reducing insulin, lots of gratitude here. And this is a little case study of Sharon, who is living with type 1 diabetes, and she's reduced her insulin use by 40%. She went from 6.4 to 5.8 in her A1c, lost 26 pounds in 4 months on our program, and her carbohydrate intake went from 85 grams per day to 410 grams per day in doing so, and she's dropped her insulin use by 40%. We see this situation and the scenario happening time and time and time again. There's so many success stories, and it's so inspirational. It's really, we love hearing these inspirational stories, and it's really exciting. So our third tool is that we host twice monthly Q&A live group calls. So basically, it's the first and third Sunday of every month, and we host live calls where you can log into a video conference line, you can be on video or just on the phone call, and you interact with our team directly. So Cyrus and I host calls from our home here. Robbie hosts some of the calls with any variety of any number of our coaching team members. We have a really awesome time doing these. It's really fun to meet our members and to answer questions. And some people just get on and listen, don't even ask any questions. They just like to hear the information. They find it really helpful. And we just have fun to the questions that you have. So some of the questions come up about, my doctor wants me to eat more protein and less carbohydrate. How do I talk with him in a non-threatening way? What can I eat to satisfy chocolate and ice cream cravings? How do I know when to reduce my metformin use? What are the best foods to eat before and after exercise? And how do I talk to my family about my new lifestyle without getting frustrated? These are just a small sample of the number of questions that. And screen. You can see Cyrus and I are in. The rest of the people are sitting and listening and interacting. So that's what it looks like. So it's a really great chance to interact with your coaches, with the other team members. It's a great way to feel supported and to see that you're not alone in this process. So a really important part of the program is knowing that there's people out there that are not only transitioning their diet, making these lifestyle changes, maybe feeling some of the same frustrations or concerns that you're having, but also that we're talking about your health and your diabetes health. And we can talk about these conversations and have these conversations with you. So it's a really wonderful environment. So this is just a breakdown of what this value of this online coaching program looks like. So with the online course alone, if you were to purchase that on its own, it would be $1,200 in value. The private Facebook group has a value with the daily coaching, the daily questions, answers, has a value of $1,000. The members only content, meaning that we do post new content into the Facebook group as well as into the online course. That additional content that's constantly being added values to about $1,500. And then the twice monthly Q&A video conferences, the value of that time and with coaches is around $1,200. So the total program value for an annual cost looks like, this is an annual cost, looks like $4,900 in value. And we have some very special bonuses for you tonight. So our first webinar bonus is that we are going to include the Mastering Diabetes 2017 Online Summit as a bonus. So this summit is full of interviews with plant-based experts. They're physicians, they're dietitians, they're people who have adopted this approach. They are living it every day. These are experts in the field of plant-based nutrition, and we've interviewed them and we've put them together in an online summit, and it went live last year. And so we are adding that in today as a bonus for you for being part of this webinar. And in doing so, you'll learn a lot more. It'll help you get a better look at what this whole plant-based nutrition world is all about. So these are some of the experts: Dr. Barnard, Dr. McMacken, Dr. Davis, Dr. Greger, all of these wonderful experts on plant-based nutrition. The list goes on. There's tons of them here. We are really excited that we have the opportunity to interact with them and share their knowledge with you. Our other webinar bonus, it's bonus number 2, is that you will get 2 weeks access to our small group coaching program. And this is valued at $250 per month. We have small group coaching available as one of our coaching options. And this is a little bit more personalized attention. And in the small group coaching, you get a weekly coaching call with Cyrus and or Robbie and other members of our team. And so we are giving you 2 weeks access to try it out, get a plan, get yourself started with this program in a more personalized way. And that's part of our bonus to you tonight for being part of this webinar. So adding in the summit, adding in the small group coaching, the value of this total package for the year is about almost $5,200. And we are giving you all of this for the annual membership price of $249 for the year, which is 30% off of our monthly rate. So we do have the online group coaching program, the Mastering Diabetes small group coaching for 2 weeks, and the online summit is yours for free. And so if you sign up and purchase this program today for $249, you're going to get the extra bonuses. You're going to get the 2 weeks jump start into your health and into your insulin resistance reversal and into this process. And you're going to get to join our Facebook group and interact with myself as well as our other coaches on a daily basis. And you just have to click on the link that is in the chat box. Yeah, you should be able to see this in your chat box now.
Yeah, and one thing I want to reiterate here is that the program itself is awesome. I mean, there's a lot of people in the chat box who are saying, yeah, it's awesome, I'm in it. The Facebook group is fun. It's, you know, it's totally worth the money, and that's, we love hearing that. It's fantastic. The small group coaching that we have that's presented right here in the middle, this is your opportunity to get, you know, help and guidance from both myself and from Robbie and from Kylie as well, and from Adam Sudd, who's a new coach of ours. And this is your opportunity to get help from us in a small group format. So rather than being in a large group coaching call, which has 50 or 60 people in it, you're here with 5 to 10 other people that are like-minded, that are going through the same process with you. So it's a way to get pseudo-individualized attention, and we really give you a lot of time to be able to help you troubleshoot your process. So this right here, independent of anything else, is actually my favorite part of our job. I love it. I absolutely love it. Every single week, we get to interact with people, have a lot of fun, and literally watch people transform in front of us. It's priceless. It's absolutely priceless.
Yeah.
So, independent of the summit, independent of this program, if you took advantage of this deal just for this 2 weeks of small group coaching, you're going to see how much fun we have, how much value you get out of it. And you're going to see just how similar you are to other people. And a lot of the questions that you have, a lot of the concerns that you have are shared by other people that look, that are living with the same type of diabetes as you. And it's just fun. I mean, it's just a really fun way to go about this process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of fun. And I, having joined the team in the past few months, it's just been really satisfying as a nurse to see people taking their health into their own hands and making the changes that they need to take care of themselves in the best way possible. I've been so honored to watch people empower themselves with these tools, and it's inspirational every day. And I feel great about the fact that I get to watch the process unfold for so many people. It's really exciting, and we love what we do, and we hope that if this is something that seems really interesting to you, and that maybe you'll come check us out and see what it's all about, because we are having a lot of fun and also learning a lot. There's a lot of education. We are teaching, people are learning and trying new things out, and with everything that is new and is tried on, there's you learn something from that. Absolutely. So I learn every day from every one of our members, and I love that I have that opportunity. So if this is something that's interesting to you,
yeah, take us up on it.
Yeah,
there's no question.
We're excited to meet you.
Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna turn on my camera, and we're gonna go to question and answer mode. So here we go. Stop share. And hopefully you can see camera. There we go. Okay, so here we go. How you guys doing? If you're still with us, this is awesome. So we have a total of 219 of you guys still here. So good. There's lots of questions still flying through the chat box, which is great. So I'm going to start reading some of these questions, and then we can just go through them. So Richard asks, does fasting help with illness? So good question. If you are ill, and ill I'm going to define as either being a bacterial infection or a viral infection, fasting is actually, as far as viral infections are concerned, fasting is something that's actually very effective, because one way to think about this is that when you eat food, you actually involve your immune system. So your immune system is affected by the quality of the nutrients that are coming into your mouth. So if you're eating foods that are high in their nutrient density, as you get from plant-based nutrition, then your immune system gets a boost from every time you open your mouth. But if you're eating foods that are this low in nutrient density, contains a lot of saturated fat and processed ingredients and sugar derivatives, then your immune system takes a hit every single time you eat food. So if you don't eat any food, then your immune system basically maximizes its opportunity to actually fight the virus that's inside of your body. So one of the things that I do when I'm sick is I actually try and minimize and I can recover a lot quicker. Another nice benefit too is that, from becoming a plant eater after being a carnivore, I don't get sick nearly as often. I do get sick maybe like once every 2 years or so, but it used to be that I would get sick 3 or 4 times a year, and now it's, relatively infrequent. So it's a great question, and I highly recommend it. Yeah. Sue, I don't have diabetes. Is this helpful for me? Yes, yes, and yes. This is helpful if you are living with any form of metabolic disease. or whether you're just healthy. There's athletes that intermittent fast because it improves their performance. So the answer is yes. If you're a human being, if you're yeast, worms, flies, a mouse, a rat, a dog, a monkey, a raccoon, intermittent fasting is an incredible technique. Just do it. Okay, Karen asks, Zazie asks, Cyrus, is there anyone who should not fast? One 16-8-hour fast or two 24-hour fasts with borderline BMI, those with adrenal issues, women. Okay, so we get this question a lot about adrenaline, insufficiency or adrenal issues. So let me talk about this here. If you have been living a high stress lifestyle over the course of time, or if you have been, not giving yourself an adequate amount of rest, you can develop a condition called adrenal insufficiency or adrenal fatigue. And basically what that means is that your body has been operating in this fight or flight mechanism for a very long time. And fight or flight is basically, what happens when you're in sort of panic mode and your adrenal gland is secreting both adrenaline and cortisol, which are these two catecholamines. And as a result of that, they're constantly dripping adrenaline and constantly dripping cortisol into your blood in order to keep you awake and alive and responding to situations as they arise. Over the course of time, your adrenal gland can get tired. In the same way that over the course of time, your pancreas can get tired from secreting too much insulin. So if you run into that problem and you have been diagnosed with adrenal insufficiency, maybe you end up with a chronic fatigue syndrome. You can end up becoming really tired. You can end up sort of, being very low energy. And as a result of that, when you don't eat food, your adrenal glands. So if you have adrenal insufficiency, if you have adrenal fatigue, what I would recommend doing is, and one of the major recommendation here is try not to go too long without food, because if you too long to eat food, then it can negatively impact your adrenal glands. And I've heard recommendations as little as 2 hours and recommendations as large as 4 hours. I'm not an adrenal specialist when it comes to like recovering from adrenal insufficiency. I'll be the first one to tell you that. But I can tell you that if that's a problem, then what I would recommend doing is trying to eat very small amounts of food every couple of hours. So rather than eating a meal every 2 hours, I would literally just eat like a banana and that's it. And then 2 hours later, maybe I would eat an apple. And then 2 hours later, I would maybe eat, maybe a couple of spoons of quinoa, right? So if you keep your meals really small but frequent, you can still become calorie restricted and still get the benefit of intermittent fasting, even though you're not necessarily negatively impacting your adrenal glands. And then finally, when it comes to another type of person that may want to rethink intermittent fasting, pregnant women. If you're pregnant, I do not recommend intermittent fasting. Okay, so that's a big caveat here, because if you're pregnant, you're eating for two. You're eating for yourself, you're eating for the baby. And I would much prefer that you're eating a very high nutrient density diet rather than eating poor nutrient density foods and intermittent fasting. Not a winning strategy. Okay, here's another question. 16-8 fasting every day is the same metabolic effect as 24-hour intermittent fasting. The answer is yes, effectively yes. The answer is yes. Whether you want to do a once per week 24-hour fast or everyday 16-8 fast, both of them are effectively equivalent to each other. Okay, is fasting safe for a person 20 pounds underweight and BMI of 16%? No, don't intermittent fast in that situation. If your BMI 16%, that doesn't make sense. I think you meant body fat percent, 16%. Point being is if you're underweight, I don't recommend intermittent fasting, because if you intermittent fast, you're bound to lose more weight. And at a certain point, you could theoretically develop a malnourishment problem. We don't see it very often, but it's possible. So, if you are underweight and trying to maybe gain weight so that you can become normal weight, then don't do intermittent fasting right now. Just eat low-fat, plant-based whole foods and, really focus on eating calories and get it from top quality sources, and you're going to be able to gain weight. And then once you're at your ideal weight, you can then throw in intermittent fasting if you want. In the study, what kind of food did the rats eat? Okay, so Ed, great question. The answer is rats in these studies, they generally eat a diet that contains something about 25% fat and usually about 40 to 50% carbohydrate and the rest in protein. So it's kind of It's not an ideal macronutrient intake, but it's like little pellets that they put into a hopper and these animals just eat it. So it's not a high fat diet. It's just it's like a medium fat, medium carbohydrate, medium protein diet. Is intermittent fasting recommended for small kids? No, don't intermittent fast for small kids. No. Intermittent fasting is something that you do as an adult. Intermittent fasting is not for kids. It's especially during development. It's not smart. Intermittent fasting can take up to a year to clean blood vessels after type 2 diabetes is reversed. Can the pancreas begin to produce insulin more normally? After type 2 diabetes is reversed, can your pancreas begin to produce insulin more normally? Yeah, so here's something that's very important to understand. In the case of type 2 diabetes, oftentimes your pancreas is not the problem. We've been told over and over and over again, if you're living with diabetes, the problem is your pancreas. The problem is your pancreas is not making enough insulin. That is a fundamentally incorrect statement. In many situations, people living with type 2 diabetes have a pancreas that's working just fine, and their pancreas is still making a sufficient amount of insulin. Okay, it may not be operating at top capacity, but it's operating at just enough capacity. So your pancreas is doing a good job. The problem is in your muscle. The problem is in your liver. The problem is in your blood vessels. Fix that problem. Reverse insulin resistance in your peripheral tissues, and the amount of insulin that your pancreas is producing then becomes enough. The goal is not to get your pancreas to make more insulin. That's not the goal. The goal is to make your muscles and liver more accepting of insulin. It's not a supply issue. It's a demand issue. Allow the demand, allow the ability of your largest glucose users to become insulin sensitive, and then to do a single more, it doesn't have to do any more work. That's the whole point. My son and I were both told we have type 1 diabetes since we both had it since childhood. However, we were told yesterday that since type 1 has now gone through 3 generations in our family, that we actually do not have type 1, but instead MODY. Would it be helpful to do genetic testing for MODY? So yes, MODY is basically called mature onset diabetes of the young, MODY, and it is a genetic, it definitely has genetic basis. Here's the deal, Marianne. The easiest way to determine whether or not you have type 1 diabetes is to get an islet cell antibody test. So you want to do 2 things, actually. You want to get an islet cell antibody test, and then you want to get a C-peptide test. So an islet cell antibody test tests for antibodies that your immune system has made that are going to cause destruction of your own beta cells. If you test positive for even 1 islet cell antibody, you have autoimmune diabetes. That's number 1. Number 2, get a C-peptide test. The C-peptide test will tell you how much insulin your pancreas is or is not producing. If your pancreas is not producing very much insulin, your C-peptide level will be low. If your pancreas is making a sufficient amount of insulin, your C-peptide level will be high. So a combination of low C-peptide and testing positive for at least 1 islet cell antibody is definitive proof that you have type 1 diabetes. If you end up with different results, you're not positive for any islet cell antibody, then sure, MODY could be a problem, but those 2 tests will basically tell you whether or not type 1 is at play. Okay. So Teresa asks, what makes the pancreas slow down production of insulin if insulin resistance is the main cause of type 2 diabetes? Again, the problem is not with your pancreas. Generally speaking, your pancreas is doing just fine. Unless you have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes 30 years ago and you've burned out the ability of your pancreas to make insulin, chances are your pancreas is making a sufficient amount of insulin. The goal is to relieve insulin resistance in your muscle and in your liver. Do that and watch as your pancreas, the function that your pancreas already has is perfectly adequate to maintain blood glucose. Nope. Maybe I did. Okay, this is a great question. When is the best time to fast if I do CrossFit 3 times a week? And that comes from Norma. Norma, I love the fact that you do CrossFit. I do CrossFit 6 times a week. I love it. Okay, so the question is, when's the best time to fast if you do CrossFit? That's a phenomenal question. It's a phenomenal question. If you're doing CrossFit 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Okay, don't do it on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's the answer. Okay, do it on Saturday or Sunday, or do it on Tuesday and Thursday. Tuesday or Thursday. Okay, choose a rest day. And that's the best thing I can tell you, because if you try and do CrossFit, especially at the intensity level that CrossFit is, on a day that you're intermittent fasting, good luck. I mean, I've never even attempted it, and I don't plan to anytime soon. Okay, Richard. I've noticed that on fasting days, I feel more alert at night, but then have difficulty getting to sleep. Comments. Richard, yeah, okay. When are you fasting? That's the question. What hours of the day you're fasting? Tony had this question in the chat box. Here's the deal. If you're finding that it's very difficult to go to sleep when you are fasting, what I would recommend doing is try a 16-8 intermittent fast and make the 8-hour window from 12 o'clock p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. So think about it this way. If you start eating food at noon and you finish eating food at 8 p.m., then you can go to sleep. It's no big deal, because it's normal. You ate dinner, you wait a couple hours, you go to sleep, boom, everything's fine. You're going to utilize your sleeping period as the majority of the time that you're fasting. So you go to sleep at 8 p.m., whatever. You go to sleep at, midnight, let's say, and you just don't eat food until 12 o'clock p.m. the next day. So that shouldn't get in the way of your sleep cycles. It shouldn't make you ravenous when you are asleep, and problem solved. So shift your 8-hour period towards the end of the day, and then sleep should become much easier. Okay. I've been fasting about 9 hours per day. I lost 30 pounds right away. It's been months since I've lost any more weight. What should I do now? Okay, Amy, if that's the case, I've been fasting about 18 hours a day. I've lost 30 pounds right away. It's been months since I've lost any more weight. What should I do? That's a good question. I need to know a couple other things. Are you moving your body on a daily basis? Are you exercising? If so, how active are you, and what's the intensity level of your exercise regimen? Number 2, what are you eating? How often are you eating? On days that you're, doing an 18-hour fast, if you're eating for 6 hours, during that 6-hour window, are you eating animal-based foods? Are you eating strictly plant-based foods? Is there oil in your diet? I need to know all of this stuff. So write it in the chat box and let me know. That's okay.
Oh, this one is not. I don't know if we're asking consistently fasting between 12 and 16 hours.
Okay.
The difference between two.
Okay, here's the deal. There are a lot of questions about, if I'm fasting for, 16 hours, 12 hours or 16 hours.
I think it's like, what's the difference between 12 hours and 16 hours?
Of fasting.
Yeah, like
okay.
It's still beneficial for you to do 12 hours versus
Got it.
16.
Okay, the answer is this. An intermittent fast, maybe I didn't make this clear earlier, and I apologize. You cannot refer to something as being an intermittent fast unless it is a minimum of 16 hours. That's it. So you're saying I did a 12-hour fast. That's not a fast. A 12-hour, not eating food is called sleep. It's called, life. An intermittent fast starts at the 16-hour window. So if you're doing a 12-hour, intermittent fast, that's not enough. It's just not enough. If you really want to get the metabolic benefit of an intermittent fast, it's got to be a minimum of 16 hours. So do that. And then, you can either do a 16-8 or you can do a 24-hour. But I would not recommend going too much over 24, and I would not recommend going anything less than 16. Okay. Nancy was asking a whole bunch of questions about oil. Doesn't your brain need oil? The answer is no, 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 no. We've been told over and over and over again by the ketogenic community, by the paleo community, by the low carbohydrate community. Your brain runs on fatty acids. It is just not true. People who say that don't understand biochemistry. Okay? Your brain runs off of glucose, period, end of story. That is the only fuel that it is designed to run off of. It can run off of ketone bodies as an emergency backup fuel. That's it. Your brain does not run off of oil. Your brain does not run off of fatty acids. Your brain does not run off of protein. Your brain runs on glucose, period, end of story. So if you've been told, oh, you need to have avocado oil or olive oil or coconut oil in your diet in order to keep your brain healthy, that is a lie. I hate to break it to you. It is a fundamentally wrong statement. We do not advocate the consumption of any oil at all. Oil is 100% fat. It causes endothelial dysfunction inside of blood vessels. It causes insulin resistance. It causes heart disease. Highly, highly do not recommend any oil at all in your diet. What time is the best time to exercise on a 16-8 program? Yeah, so Karen, I think I answered that earlier in the chat box maybe. If you're doing a 16-8 fast and you want to exercise, do it during the 8-hour window. Do it during your feeding window. Try not to do it during your fasting window. It's going to be really hard. Okay, a 16-hour fast is, you might be able to get away with it, but you know, do it in the middle of your 8-hour window. That's what I would do for sure. How do you determine whether to eliminate breakfast or dinner? Figure out which one is logistically easier for you. If you're on the run for breakfast, or maybe you have a cat that wants to take over. If you're on the run for breakfast, hi kitty, you can stay here. Then, you know, that might be one thing to take into consideration, right? Was it easy for you to skip that meal? Maybe. Do you have a family dinner every single night? If so, that might be more challenging to skip dinner, right? So figure out, you know, which one of these is logistically easier to eliminate, and then try it out. And then if that works, cool, stick with it. If it doesn't work, test out the other one, right? It doesn't really matter. It's all about you, your lifestyle, what works for you. You do that, you choose the right one, and then we'll be set. Do you recommend fasting for type 1.5 diabetes? Yes, 100% yes. Again, if you're not underweight, then go ahead and fast. Type 1.5 is adult onset type 1 diabetes. So if you are living with type 1.5 diabetes, you can absolutely do an intermittent fast. You can absolutely do an intermittent fast. There's no problem with that. Okay. How long can you do a 16-8 intermittent fast every day or like a week? Paula, you can do a 16-8 intermittent fast every single day, 7 days a week. Go for it. I highly recommend it. It's very fun.
There's a lot of questions about coffee and fasting.
Okay, so lots of questions about coffee. Okay, so during the fast, the question is, can I drink coffee during the fast?
That's right.
Okay, so technically speaking, coffee is not caloric. Therefore, you know, when you drink coffee, you're not taking on calories. So technically speaking, it's a safe, you know, you can do it. But here's the problem. If you're drinking coffee during an intermittent fast, the reason you're drinking coffee is because probably you feel low energy during the fast, and you're drinking coffee to try and keep you from feeling tired. Coffee can significantly impact your blood glucose. The more coffee you drink, the more blood glucose fluctuations you can get. So it doesn't really make any sense if you think about it. What I would recommend doing is don't drink coffee. Just live a fast and drink water, and just do that. Drink non-caloric beverages, have water, have green tea, and try not to, you know, rely on caffeine for energy, because it's not a winning strategy. Can you take amla green during a fast? So the answer is yes, you can take amla green during a fast. Amla green does contain some caffeine, so I don't want to sound contradictory where I'm saying don't drink coffee, but have some amla green. Amla green has a quarter the amount of caffeine as coffee does, but amla green also is very antioxidant rich, and it has been shown time and time again to reduce blood glucose, reduce blood pressure, and reduce cholesterol levels, which coffee cannot do. So if you're drinking amla green on a daily basis, I would personally continue to do that even on days when I'm fasting, and it's not going to present any problems to you. Okay, last question from Jeff. The question is, can improved insulin sensitivity be helpful for depression? I found that my mood has been much improved since starting low-fat, plant-based whole food. Love it, Jeff. That's fantastic. I was actually talking about this with a friend not too long ago, that your cognitive health is very much influenced by the quality of the nutrients that are going into your mouth. And there are studies that are being conducted now on people who have been vegetarian for a long period of time, or people who have been vegan. And it turns out that anecdotally, I can say this: people who are vegan have self-reported that they are just happier. They literally are just happier people. Okay. How can that possibly unfold? Well, there's a very complicated circuitry inside of your body that goes between your gut or your large intestine and your brain. So your large intestine and your brain are constantly talking to each other 24 hours a day. They're sending signals back and forth to each other, and they're having a conversation. So when you consume really nutrient-dense foods in your mouth and they end up, the microbiome inside of your large intestine ends up turning over and becoming a much more, what's the word I'm looking for? A much more diverse population, a much more beneficial population of bacteria. Your microbiome can then change the signaling that your large intestine is sending up to your brain. And so as a result of that, your appetite may change, your happiness level might change, your satiation might change, your sort of like spontaneous, activity level might change. And as a result of that, you might just feel better, heaven forbid. You might just be a happier person, right? So if you're experiencing that right now, just keep going, keep going. One of my previous clients that I was working with personally told me that he had tried to get off of antidepressant medications multiple times in his life, and he could never do it because the withdrawal symptoms were too hard. He became a plant-based eater. At the 6-month marker, he said, I'm going to try it one more time. He came off of his antidepressant medications in 3 weeks. He says, this was the easiest it's ever been. I'm never going back on those things ever again. Plant-based nutrition fundamentally changed the way my brain operates, and now I don't need them as much anymore. So that's my long-winded way of saying your brain loves you for it. Keep doing it. And I'm very happy to hear that already. So that's good. That's it, guys. We're done. It's you guys have been attentive for quite a while. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're an hour and a half in.
Thank you for being here. We're really glad to have you, and glad to talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have a great night.
Once again, if you're interested in participating in the Mastering Diabetes program, we highly recommend it. Obviously, we're biased. We love the program. We created the program. It's so effective. It's scary. And we're here to help out in any way we can. We love interacting with we love interacting with people who actually care and who actually are really, really motivated to want to change their health from the inside out. And if that's where you are, and if you feel like it's time to sit in the driver's seat of your diabetes health, we're here for you.
Yeah.
We're here for you. Highly recommend it. Again, if you sign up at the $249 price, which is 30% off, you'll get the Mastering Diabetes Online Summit for free, and you'll get 2 weeks of small group coaching for free. Please take us up on this opportunity. Take us up on it. You will love it. If you don't love it for any reason, just let us know. But I'm very confident that you're going to enjoy this process, and it's going to work wonders for you. So hopefully we'll see you on the inside, and we'll take it from there.
Yes.
Okay, bye.